Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, another Kentuckian unfortunately makes statements indicating support for the assassination of Donald Trump. Beshear signs a deal with South Korea on honoring their driver's licenses in Kentucky, and Kentucky driver's licenses being honored in South Korea. What could go wrong? Speaking of Beshear, he says he doesn't have the money to fund new laws, which are coming into place, almost 20 laws. He says is in limbo because he doesn't have the money. They're unfunded mandates, which is a statement relying on people to be ignorant of how the budgeting process works in the state. And finally, I'll go over a few more of the contested House races in Kentucky. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, as always, please, you can reach out to the show by emailing info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com and hit the contact tab to reach out. As well, remember, please leave a review if you're listening on the podcast format. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Share it with others. All those things help share the show. I remind you every day because you need to do it. Every single day you can do it. That'd be great. So please take a second right now even and leave a review on the show. It helps a lot. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So Libs of TikTok has been tweeting out a lot of people as they come across them around the country that have posted support for the assassination of Donald Trump, or posted things post-assassination about you shouldn't have missed, basically supporting the idea of killing who will likely become the next U.S. president, former U.S. President Donald Trump, and has been just posting their names. They posted it online and then sharing it out there. And a lot of these people have been fired. We saw Bellarmine University. They put somebody on unpaid leave. That person, according to Bellarmine, has now been fired officially. Don't know why it took a few days. Well, we have a new person in Kentucky who is of the ilk. And this one might be even worse when you think about the people that they're dealing with. This is a Dennis Burton, who's a mental health professional specializing in LGBTQ therapy at Compass Counseling out in Paducah. He shared out a post of, if you've ever seen the meme of the Middle Easternish guy, maybe Asian, India area of Asia guy with his hands on his hips, kind of staring angrily. And it says the entire world at one guy on July 13th, 2024. And with the caption, you had one job. So clearly indicating the fact that he's upset that the shooter had missed taking down Donald Trump. And what's interesting or concerning about Dennis Burton here, who, by the way, he's an LGBTQ therapist, and based upon just simply his appearance and the fact he's got an earring, a circle earring in one ear, I'm going to say he's probably gay himself. What's interesting is he's a mental health professional. And this really becomes kind of a student becomes the master kind of situation, where somebody who clearly has mental health issues, somebody who would wish death on somebody based upon their political views, just a real trash human who himself needs therapy, has decided to go ahead and become a therapist, helping LGBTQ people, supposedly helping them with what? I don't know. Because apparently he himself has mental health issues. So how are you counseling people? I know people say that, a mental health counselor, they can have mental issues. They can themselves need therapy. That's fine and okay. But in this situation here, you have somebody that says, hey, it's okay to kill people for political reasons. Now, I want you to think about the fact over the last several years, and especially the heated rhetoric over the last even year or so in Kentucky, how much they've talked about how you're literally killing transgender youth by not allowing them to transition. And so if Dennis Burton's the kind of guy who's willing to support the killing of people for political reasons, while he's counseling people that he himself believes the people in Kentucky, the political people in Kentucky, the Republican majority in Kentucky, is literally killing, that lays a pretty fertile ground for Dennis Button to not only be himself potentially a violent individual, clearly his violent tendencies if he celebrates this, but also he's among some of the most vulnerable, mentally speaking, obviously, as he's a mental health professional therapist at a counseling place. Who knows what kind of ideas he's putting into the heads of already disturbed individuals. Now, I am seeing reports that Compass Counseling has already terminated Dennis Button from his position, but it just goes to show the kinds of just horrible humans that are out there. You know, we would like to see a moment where perhaps we can turn the temperature down and the country can come together. But when one side is willing to literally celebrate, not only celebrate, but be upset that a political opponent, somebody they perceive as a political opponent, Donald Trump, isn't dead. They're mad about it. They're mad he wasn't murdered. They're upset at the guy for missing. And they can do that, but not only do that, but they felt comfortable saying it publicly. It's not just having the thought of, man, I wish they would have got him. It's not even just having the thought. It's about being comfortable saying it out loud. It is clear that people on the left, their ideologies are violent. And I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about liberals. I'm talking about the leftist base are just not very good people. I don't wish harm on them in the same sense they probably wish harm on me. I hope that they see the error of their ways and they have different experiences and they take this as a moment to realize that they're part of the problem. But it just goes to show that it's the left who's the issue, not the right. Here, follow me here, okay? You are in a super majority Republican state. Like Kentucky will probably vote for Trump like 75%. Not only that, but Dennis Button is in Paducah, Kentucky. And while Paducah maybe itself may be a little bit more liberal as most cities are, it's not a big city center like Lexington and Louisville in that same way. And so you're literally surrounded by super duper majority of people who would vote for Trump. And you feel comfortable going online publicly in front of all your neighbors where everybody could see it and saying that you hope their guy that they want to vote for had died. And you feel comfortable doing that without any repercussions at all. Not just you had the thoughts and you're like, oh, I better not do that because I might have repercussions. But you literally posted it and then expected there to be no repercussions at your job. Clearly, you expected there to be no repercussions for doing so amongst your community. You expect to be able to live life like you always had doing that. Now, could you imagine on the right ever posting anything as remotely close to wishing death on a political opponent on the right, and then you believing that you're going to get to live your life without that coming back to get you under your own name, posting something online saying that you wish somebody on the left would die because of political differences? We are under no, even if you actually have those internal thoughts, we were under no idea that we'd ever say those things out loud. We know we would be gone in a heartbeat from wherever we worked. We know we'd be super duper canceled. We know everybody, including people on the right, wouldn't want to associate with anybody like that, and so on. And it just goes on and on, the reasoning why. That's how you know that the right is actually far more tolerant and less violent than the left of opposing viewpoints. Because the left feels comfortable wishing death on their political opponents. Moving on, kind of away from that topic there, Beshear has come out and said that there's been a reciprocity agreement between South Korea and Kentucky on honoring each other's licenses. The reasoning behind this, the Blue Oval battery plant in the E-Town area in Hardin County there is a partnership between Ford and SK Batteries, which stands for South Korea Batteries. And so South Korea is the part owner on that big factory. So Beshear went there, and one of the things is honoring each other's driver's licenses, which left me to wonder, like, is this even a good idea? I mean, let's not put it aside. Let's address this. It's already hard enough to get your driver's license in Kentucky. I mean, think about this. I've complained about it on the show, I don't even know how many times, but you have to book appointments weeks out. You have to literally, if you have a kid, let's say you have a 16, 17-year-old kid, or an 18-year-old kid. You're 18 years old and you want to get a driver's license. It might be now literally easier for you and quicker for you to board a plane and fly to South Korea and get your license than it is getting a license in Kentucky. Because you're probably having to book an appointment at least 3 months out in order to get your license. And you have to wake up every day at 7 a.m. to check their website to see if they have any appointments available. Not 3 months, 3 weeks out. That's 3 weeks out. Or you get on a plane, fly to South Korea, get your license, come back. And it might just be quicker. I don't know what exactly all the laws are, how hard it is to get a license in South Korea. But you would think before we start throwing Koreans onto our roads, we might want to deal with the fact that we can't get Kentuckians licenses and driver's licenses and motorcycles licenses and vehicle inspections done in a reasonable amount of time, perhaps before we compound the issue. But that's not what Beshear decided to do here. No, he said, you know what, let's go ahead and just throw South Koreans onto the road. This can't go bad at all. Which led me to ask the question, what exactly are the driving laws in South Korea? Will it be any problem at all? And so I found some U.S. Forces South Korea videos talking about what it's like driving in South Korea, what to know about the difference here. I want to play a few of those for you here now, just to see if we can figure out maybe if this is such a good idea. Here we go. Here's them talking about how when driving on the roads in America or South Korea, you should go ahead and make sure you can do math. No, I'm not kidding. They want you to do math, not easy math like divide by 2, but let's actually take a listen to what they had to say about it.
Do not mix up miles and kilometers. As you know, there are 2 units of measurement for speed, miles per hour and kilometers per hour. And South Korea uses the kilometer system. This can actually be very confusing, and not only because of the differences in measurement systems, but also because of the speedometer of imported cars from the US is usually set to miles. However, there is a simple way that you can use to convert miles to kilometers. Just multiply the number of miles by 1.6 and you'll get kilometers.
Just multiply it by 1.6, or in this case, divide it by 1.6, and the South Koreans will be able to drive their imported South Korean vehicles simply and easily and able to understand. Now, of course, I understand there's little converters and things like that go on your cars where most cars have kilometers. It's easy to read it. I get that. But it's something to notice that maybe before we just release people coming from a country that literally uses different units of measurement, maybe we should at least double check to make sure that they know that we're using a different unit of measurement. But surely, they must have really, really similar laws and traffic signs and lane markings. Driving in the two, you probably won't get confused at all. Let's see how similar they are. This is the United States Forces Korea. On the traffic signs and lane markings, based on the reciprocity, I would assume they're really similar. Let's see what they have to say.
One of the first things that you will notice when you take to the road is that Korea's traffic signs are very different from those in the US. In fact, Korean traffic signs have more in common with European signs than the traffic signs most of you are used to. Not only the signs are different, but the lane markings are also very different and contain more information. Let's take a look at a few situations that you may find yourself in if you are not familiar with the traffic signs and lane markings. Like, how do I know if it is okay to make a left turn when at a green traffic signal? Or what does it mean when the road is painted red?
So obviously, very similar. There's nothing different. In fact, that video informed us that they're very similar. There's no difference. In fact, Korean road signs are just like Kentucky's road signs. They're just in a different language. That's it. Right? That's what they said, right? Of course not. In fact, they said quite the opposite. They actually said that it's very different. In fact, here's another rule that you could find may end up having you pretty upset at these reciprocity Korean drivers in Kentucky. Let me read to you a rule from South Korea. It says intersections with a right turn signal. When a right turn signal is installed at intersections, drivers must follow the signals. This means drivers can only make a right turn when the green arrow appears on the signal and cannot proceed if the light is red. Now, for those of you unaware, I don't know if they have done this yet in your community, but in Lexington, what they have done is they've installed at some busy intersections a green right turn light. And so it will turn green when the lane, somebody's turning left, like a lane's to the right of you are turning left. So they're blocking it. Nobody can even turn right into that lane anyways. You don't have to yield to anybody. So it'd normally be a right on red where you have to stop, look, and then you can take your right turn if it's clear. But in this case, what they're saying is they installed a green and red light just to kind of let you know, hey, you don't need to look, just go, 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 go. You're free to go. You're free to turn right in order to help speed up the flow of traffic so people are not stopping to take a right-hand turn at these busy intersections. But even when the light is red, you can still turn right on red with a pause. But with these reciprocity South Korean drivers, well, they will come up now on these red turn signals and think they cannot take a right on red and will be sitting there all day while everybody's honking at them until that light literally turns green, which can cause some traffic issues. I'm just pointing that out. But hey, you know what? It's great. We're throwing more foreign drivers onto the streets. Well, Kentucky drivers themselves can barely get a license. Nothing will go wrong. I'm sure none of you will ever get into an accident caused by the fact that somebody who's unfamiliar with driving in America is suddenly driving around on our streets because Beshear thought it would be a awesome and amazing and great idea. Here's another headline for you here. This is from the Kentucky Lantern. Some new Kentucky laws are in limbo as governor says lawmakers failed to fund them. GOP lawmakers insist executive branch is duty-bound to implement enacted bills. So it starts off here. It says Kentucky legislators enacted more than 200 laws this year, most of which took effect today, July 15th. At least 20 new laws are in limbo, however. Democrat Governor Andy Beshear says the Republican-controlled General Assembly failed to fund them to the tune of $153 million, even after he informed lawmakers of the problem on April 10th. On April 15th, the session's final day, the legislature passed Senate Bill 91, a budget cleanup bill that the administration says made $372 million in appropriations. But none of those appropriations address the unfunded mandates outlined in the governor's letter. We have consistently said, even if some bills represent good policy, if the legislature does not provide the funding, it does not intend for the executive branch to perform those services. Republican lawmakers are unconvinced. Dustin Isaacs, the spokesperson for the Republican supermajority in Kentucky Senate, in a statement said the governor's constitutional responsibility is to execute the law. The administration's excuse for not implementing the bills enacted by General Assembly during the previous legislation session rests on their flawed interpretation and application of a Supreme Court case dating back to Governor Fletcher's administration. The bills in limbo range from House Bill 271, which mandates creation of a statewide system for reporting child abuse 24/7 that the administration estimates would cost $43 million, to a school safety bill, Senate Bill 2, which authorizes school guardians with a price tag estimated by the administration at $220,000. So what Beshear's trying to argue is that if you mandate he do things in law, you mandate that he has to put a program in place or has to do something new, you have to put in a line item funding for that, which just relies on you to not know how our government works. His argument here doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, let me put it to you this way, okay? So in 2021, the legislature passed a law requiring that the K through 12 schools must teach the Magna Carta as long as other documents, right? They have to include that in their history teaching. Now, in order to enforce that, does the legislature then have to include some sort of funding to make sure that you cover the Magna Carta in your curriculum? Or to give you another example more at the state level, let's say that the legislature says that you must, to the governor, you must enforce a new traffic law at KSP. You must enforce a new traffic law. Is he saying that unless the legislature somehow figures out the amount of money it will cost to enforce that traffic law, they now have to go out, they have to specifically put a line item amount of money in the budget for KSP to do? That's not how we budget in Kentucky, okay? What he's talking about there is just a line item budgeting process. That's not what we do in Kentucky. What we do in Kentucky, there are a few things that we do that's called restricted funds, where it's earmarked for something specific. Like, for an example, if we say, hey, unemployment, you're going to get a new computer system. This is something we did. They will then, in the budget, earmark $50 million for a new computer program for processing unemployment claims for, workers' comp or for unemployment. And then the Beshear can use that to spend on only that. That's the only thing he can spend that money on. Any of that money not spent on that has to be returned to the budget trust fund, the reserve trust fund. So if he, for some reason, is able to do it for $40 million instead of 50, then the other $10 million gets returned to the budget trust fund. But what the legislature also does is gives them a general pot of money to spend on whatever they see fit. For an example, during COVID, Beshear did not need line item money given to him to enforce all of his COVID mandates. He just did it using the money that was already appropriated out of the general fund. And so unless Beshear is trying to claim, for an example, he's trying to claim that there's $43 million they need for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services for an online, for just simply a portal to report child abuse. Okay? They need $43 million for that. Well, that would assume then, the only way I believe that argument would hold up, in my opinion, is unless two situations. One, for some reason in the bill, they've said that $43 million will come from this specific revenue source, and that specific revenue source doesn't exist or doesn't have $43 million. Or two, if they have line item budgeted all of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services dollar amount, every single dime the Cabinet for Health and Family Services will spend, they've line itemed where there's less than $43 million of discretionary spending for the governor to play with. So unless Cabinet for Health and Family Services is doing $43 million worth of work that is not specific, that the legislature did not say they had to do, well, then you have to implement the law. And I mean, when you look at it, he's talking about Senate Bill 2, he needs $220,000 for it. Just literally $220,000. That's it. You're going to sit here and tell me that the Kentucky Department of Education doesn't have $220,000? That's more than their DEI budget by a significant amount. Their DEI budget is like 10 times that, 20 times that, just in salaries, let alone the materials and everything else going into it. So you're going to sit here and tell me the legislature never once passed a law requiring Beshear get a DEI department. So what they've done is they've said, this is what you have to do. You have to enforce the law. You have to do these things. Here's pots of money for you. We're not going to tell you what you have to cut to find the money to do this, but you're going to have to cut something. You make the decision of what you want to cut, but you do have to do this. That's what the legislature did. And Beshear's trying to claim, he's basically saying for the Department of Education, Senate Bill 2, we're not going to tell you where you have to cut to find the $220,000. We're not going to tell you where you need to find it in the budget, but you need to find it to implement this. Which either Beshear, what he's advocating for, if he wants to go down this road, what he's saying is that he wants every single dollar amount that he spends to be line itemed out. This is what you can spend on pencils. This is what you can spend on tissues. This is what you can spend on pens. This is what you can spend on paper. Here's how much you can spend on rent in this department. He doesn't want that, but that seems to be what he's advocating for here. That's the position he's putting them in, where that has to be the way they handle this going forward. Otherwise, every single new law that passes that requires the government to enforce a new law or do some new process would have to require with it more funding. And it also assumes that everything that Beshear is currently doing, we have to spend money on, even though he's not even legally required to do all this. He's not legally required to do equity and inclusion studies. He's not legally required to do it, but the Cabinet for Health and Family Services does it all the time. They do it constantly. So what Beshear's also claiming here is there's literally nothing he does that isn't critical to the mission of the department. That for some reason he doesn't have $220,000 in the Department of Education. And if he gives that up, for some reason he can no longer fulfill the other legal requirements of the Cabinet for Health and Family or for the Kentucky Department of Education. This dog don't hunt for me. I think his interpretation here is wrong. I could be wrong, but it wouldn't make sense if based upon his argument here, it's not it. Now, if he wants to argue take for example, the $43 million price tag on the 24/7 reporting system, which is just ridiculous, but let's say he wants to argue that. Well, you one have to show proof of how you got to that $43 million, which is making a lot of people raise their eyebrows. And then two, you would have to prove that the other business of that department, you're one, legally required to do, and two, exceeds $43 million in spending that you can't find from there. So you have to prove it does cost $43 million, and you have to prove that everything you do there legally is required up until, and so you don't have enough money because you're legally required to do other things. It's just, frankly, I think it is a ridiculous excuse by Beshear, just trying to get more money because he doesn't want to cut anything. Because if he does have to cut something, well, that may make him look a little bad on the national stage. And, well, Beshear's eyeing up that presidential election there in 2028. He's pretty excited about it. Speaking of elections, we've got a few elections continuing on my series of covering elections in Kentucky that are being fought out there in the General Assembly. We're actually going to do probably only one, Alton Ayer versus Jim Gooch. So for those of you unaware, Jim Gooch, it's kind of an interesting situation with the Jim Gooch there. So he's the incumbent, and he's been in office for 29 years, a long time, been in office nearly 30 years. Now, Jim Gooch, this is out in Western Kentucky, faced off against Lynn Beckler 2 years ago in a primary, and he only got 55% of the vote. Why? Well, Lynn Beckler was also an incumbent legislator. What happened is they combined two districts in Western Kentucky in redistricting. They put together two legislators where they now lived in the same district area. They lived in the same legislative district, and so they had to go against each other, both of them incumbents for that seat. But the district was mainly that of Jim Gooch's. It covered most of his old area because the legislative leadership there in the House wanted to get rid of Lynn Beckler. He was too conservative for them. They can't have that. So they went ahead and districted him in with Jim Gooch. Jim Gooch won with 55% of the vote. Then he went on in the general in 2022 to beat Alan Lossner, 77.5% to 22.5%. So pretty handy winning. So you'd think that Alton Ayer must be one of the most fantastic candidates. He's taking a swing at it. He's going to go ahead. He's going to deliver a better win than the other guy did. Well, Alton Ayer was nice enough to complete his Ballotpedia survey. And so I want to tell you, I'm just going to go through who you are, tell us about yourself. Statement. Remember, he's filling this out. He wants voters to see this. He wants you to judge whether or not you should vote for him for House District 12 based upon this information. So let's go here. I'm a 71-year-old retired custom woodworker. My experience with people spans 6 decades, from helping Dad on his milk route to caring for Dad for 2.5 years at the end of his life. Let me read that statement to you again. My experience with people spans 6 decades. So he's claiming that he has experience with people. So he's trying to say that he has a lot of experience with a lot of different people over the last 60 years, which, one, he's 71. So 6 decades would put him at 11, because that's minus 60. So he is definitely counting from the time he was 12 until he now. But the weird thing is he saying he didn't experience people before 12? Was he kept in a closet, hidden away? Well, apparently he was hidden away from people, because his next statement here, he did, my experience with people spans 6 decades, semicolon, from helping Dad on his milk route to caring for Dad for 2.5 years at the end of his life. Now, it's fantastic that he's talking about working with his dad, helping out his dad, taking care of his dad at his end of his life. But you'd think if you're talking about your experience with people, you might list who those people are, how you've had that experience outside of your father. Now, remember, my experience with people spans 6 decades is not its own sentence. Now, if he had just said, my experience with people spans 6 decades, period. From helping Dad on his milk route to caring for Dad for 2.5 years at the end of his life, I have been tied to Kentucky, or something like that. But that's not it. My experience with people spans 6 decades is considered to be a part of the rest of the sentence of from helping Dad on his milk route to caring for Dad for 2.5 years at the end of his life. Neither of those require you to have had experience with people other than your father. So what I would assume then is that Jim Gooch's opponent here, Alton Iyer, has only had experience with his father. That's the only people he knows. Based upon his sentence structure and how he's put that together, that's how I'd understand it. But he goes on to say, he does go on to explain it. So I don't want to sound like I'm giving a hard time, but I am. Because this indicates a level of incompetence that we need to talk about. It doesn't matter if it's Republican, if it's Democrat, if it's anybody, right? When you have spelling errors, sentences that don't make sense, you're not doing, you've got surveys filled out where things make no sense, you have bad punctuation, the sentences are run on, or they have nothing to do with each other, you have no cognitive linear thought going on, you're not answering the question being asked. It's worth calling out because it means you're so careless, you don't have anybody else read things or give you opinion on things. And I can say this as a candidate. I have been a candidate in 2 races. I have been a candidate in 2 races. I'm not going to pretend they're the biggest, largest campaigns ever. We had some campaign staff, some volunteers and stuff. I can tell you right now, I never answered a survey without 3 or 4 people reading my answers for at least spell checking to make sure that it made sense and it was clear what I was trying to say, because I knew those surveys could be made public. I never once would publish something without people reading through it. I'm not saying I never had spelling errors on anything ever, but I had people double and triple check. And so when I see a candidate send out a mailer with spelling errors, or I see them make spelling errors on their websites, or I see them make spelling errors in their About Me, it tells me they're careless and not paying attention. And more importantly, they have apparently nobody in their inner circle that can be bothered to take the time to actually check over their work. That's why I call it out. That's why it bothers me. It may seem trivial and small to you, but it does bother me for that reason. I continue now. I graduated from Livermore High School, Oakland City University, and attended Virginia Commonwealth University. I've experienced in many work areas, but having a custom woodworking shop was my most fulfilling. Having an individual describe work they wish to have done, then drawing a blueprint and building their dream and seeing the joy in their face is very special. I attended, so he doesn't currently attend church, apparently. I attended St. Paul's Church in St. Paul's Church is Richmond, Virginia. I was involved with, I got to read this to you word for word, okay? I was involved with 2 remodels, the cleaning of the stained glass windows, comma, racial reconciliation and outreach, period. The involvement in these projects taught me to bring people together with different opinions to compromise until the result was better than either party thought possible. Maybe 2 remodels you could make that claim on. Cleaning of stained glass windows, I can't compromise. Like, the result is the windows were cleaned. And racial reconciliation. So, one, the fact that you would say, I one time was involved with remodeling a church and cleaning its stained glass windows, like, as you're who you are, tell us about us. Like, this is your statement of why you should be voted for. This is why you're politically savvy. And your response is, volunteered to help out with church remodels and clean some stained glass. Like, that doesn't mean, like, you can say, hey, I attended St. Paul's Church, I volunteered in community outreach and helped people, and I saw firsthand the experiences and the troubles people had. You know, like, something like that makes sense. But to literally be like, you should elect me because I one time volunteered to help figure out a remodel on a church and cleaning of stained glass, doesn't actually make a compelling case. And then on top of that, he throws racial reconciliation and outreach in with remodeling and cleaning glass windows. Like, those are in the same vein. Like, I was involved in 2 remodels, comma, the cleaning of stained glass windows, comma, racial reconciliation and outreach. So they're like, list your accomplishments. And he talks about other random things and then racial reconciliation. It's not, remember what I said about linear thought? Like, things make sense to go together. That doesn't even make sense to go together. Then he goes on, the involvement in these projects taught me to bring people together with different opinions to compromise until the result was better than either party thought possible. Did you resolve racial reconciliation? I thought the entire Democrat platform is about the fact that, well, racial reconciliation isn't done yet, right? Anyways, we continue. I never thought I'd be running for a state office. I had thought about local offices, but between kids, work, and church, my plate was full. My plate was empty after Dad died in 2021. There's his dad again. I was looking for something to become involved, comma, I was thinking about local support for the local Democrat Party. The next thing I knew, after several conversations, I was filing to run for House District 12. That is a compelling story. That is a compelling story. I know what I want to hear from my candidates is, yeah, I just had a lot of free time on my hands, so I thought, well, I'll go ahead and run for House District. Yeah, it's a hobby. It's just something it's just a hobby. That sells it to me. You know, you felt real called because you were bored. Really good stuff. And hopefully you're seeing, those of you who've listened to the different parts of this ongoing series of covering these candidates, maybe you've realized that the Democrat candidates for the House are all pretty lackluster, not very put together, and don't seem to be very professionally recruited, because quite literally the Democrats have to find some of the dumbest people in order to get them to run for office in a seat that they're going to lose 70-30. Like, if I knew going into it, you're going to lose this election, I would never run for, like, guaranteed. You don't even have a 1% chance. It's not there. This is an election where even when it was the midterms of Trump in 2022, even when it was all in the favor of Democrats, where Democrat turnout would be higher, you'd get the least amount of Trumpers and everything else in that district, they only got like less than 30% of the vote. You think what? You're so good with your experience cleaning stained glass windows? You're going to suddenly bring in another 30% of the vote over the last guy? It's not going to happen. And that's the thing. And it just, like I said, it shows this Democrat bench is not there. And the reason why I also want to point that out, and because on KET, the state director for the Democrat Party this was during the primary, said they focused on not quantity, but quality of candidates. This is their quality. A guy who was bored, that one time helped clean some stained glass windows. People prior to this, people who have no websites. Alton does have a website, but it doesn't even say what he believes in. People have no websites. People who have to cut videos explaining why they have an extensive criminal record. Is not a good crop of candidates, but we'll continue in this. Maybe we'll find a good one in here somewhere. I want to hold your breath. Anyways, well, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooper Show. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Friday, tomorrow. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.